Okay, again, I'm getting ready to sand, and like I said before, you need to wear a respirator, a mask to keep all this out of your lungs. I'm not doing that because you're not going to be able to hear me talking. So since I'm doing a little repair area here, I'm not wearing the mask just so you can hear what I'm talking about. This is a little area here. I've got just a little block with 36 grit paper stuck on it. You can buy this at any auto body supply store. Not every auto parts store is going to have this type of stuff and stick on paper and these type of sanding blocks for you. I like to keep a wire brush because I get on this stuff really, really wet and it will clog up the paper sometimes and you can just clean it out. So I kind of didn't put a whole lot of hardener in it, so it's drying a little slower, so I have a little bit of time to talk to you. So I'll just keep touching it and waiting for it to not really print, and then I'll start cutting it down. Okay, you can see it's setting up a little bit, and I kind of like to keep some old 36 grit paper around and some old 80 just for doing what I'm going to do here. I kind of call myself the sandpaper hoarder. I never really throw paper away unless it's totally, totally bad. The way fillers dry, they actually dry on the surface a little bit quicker than they do all the way through, so there's like a skin on there. I like to take some of the old paper and kind of see how it's still wet and it's gumming up the paper, but this is old paper that's almost out of its life. Just kind of, not much pressure, I'm just kind of peeling that skin off of it that dries, and that lets it dry better, more thoroughly. And I don't really do this all the time, like if you're wiping the whole side of the car, skim coating it, because I hate to tell some of you beginners out there that most all the high-end show cars that you see, all these award winners, indoor, outdoors, and everything, they're pretty much all skim coated. I call it skim coat. Some people call it hard coat. Some people call it shell coating. But I mean, it's not like we can't do no metal work and we're just shaping it with filler. I had an old guy tell me one time that you could metal finish a car and spend months and months and months metal finishing it and use hardly any filler and then prime it and block it. Or you can do that same job, a little bit less time in metal finishing, and use just a skim coat of filler on it. You get the car done, it's way straighter, and pretty much 99% of the cars, if they don't have any filler in them, they're probably not straight. They might look straight. To me and to a hot rod builder, there isn't hardly a straight, slick, orange peel-free paint job that comes out of any dealership, no matter how expensive the car is. Even Ferraris don't have good paint jobs on them as hot rod builders look at them. Okay, so this is setting up, getting my block here. You can see that it's still gumming just a little bit. That's why the wire brush is here, to keep the paper clean. And another reason I like to do this kind of wetter, see how the dust, even though you're supposed to wear a mask, that dust right now is heavier and it falls to the floor quicker and it's not floating around in the air. So again, this is just the Z-glass filler, kind of just going over the welded areas. I'm going to sand most all this off. And you always want to sand different directions. If you sand just like this, one of our next videos will be blocking some primer, and I can show you real easy on primer blocking techniques. But if you kind of go like this, you'll be digging in with that block here and there, and I tilt the block to kind of go around these edges. This Z-glass, if you take the time, it sands a little harder than the Z-chrome filler we're going to put on. You can actually sand this glass out enough and then prime right over it. It sands a little hard for me. Like I say, I don't really enjoy sanding. I just like to speed up the process, so I just use this as a skim. Okay, we've done the Z-glass, which is again the fiberglass mixture stuff. We're going to take a little bit of the filler. Same way as I talked about before. Mix it, trying to keep it as low to your mixing board as you can. You don't want to whip it up in the air and force air into it. You want to keep it down, and you're kind of squishing it all together. And see how the color's changing. Take it over to the truck. Okay, we're over here and we're going to smear it on just like we did the other. You can see how thin it is, that the metal's kind of cutting through. I'm going to put it on a little heavier because we're sanding it. When I was younger, there was actually a guy in high school trying to do body work, and he couldn't figure out how to smooth the filler out enough. He didn't quite comprehend that you could sand this stuff. And again, I'm going to start with 36 again, just because it speeds it up. I do actually go through a lot of paper. I like to keep fresh paper. Again, some shops that I go to, they're really crazy about using paper. And sometimes I take my own because I know I'm going to go through it. To me, fresh paper cuts faster, and time is money. And if you're new to this, the more you spread it, the more you'll get used to putting it on. Some of my buddies back home, they like to call me the cake froster. It's basically what you're doing. You're frosting a cake right now. Again, you want to go both directions, like your mom does, in the filler to smash it into the sand scratch. And I will go clean this off real quick. When I do fillers, I don't have my cell phone on me. I don't answer the shop phone when it rings. I lock the door. Nobody comes in, because when I'm sanding filler, I don't like it to get away from you. If something would happen and I leave this right here and that sets up, I'm probably going to take that grinder and grind it, rough it back up, and grind it almost all the way down, because I really hate sanding hard filler. So I'll be right back. Okay, I've got the filler on. I've got my sandpaper here, my blocks. I've not been away from this filler only barely even a minute. And I'm here, same thing, I'm getting it to see when it's going to stop fingerprinting. And then I will start sanding it again with the technique that I use with the wire brush to get on a little quicker. This works for some people. It always has worked for me. I worked with a lot of people through the years on different things, TV shows and different shops, and this is one thing that I haven't really seen a lot of people that do this. And when I show the technique, especially for doing a whole side of the vehicle, especially if somebody that hasn't been doing body work for over 20 years like I have, they kind of take this and adapt it. There's 100 ways to get to the end result doing body work. This is just the strange way. This is how I do it. I'm showing you some tips and tricks of some things that I've learned through the years. It may not work for you, but it does for me. So again, worn out sandpaper, still pretty wet to be putting a block on. I'm barely touching it. It's almost like I'm re-spreading it with a spreader, but using sandpaper. Knocking that skin off of it so it dries a little more uniformly. And as it starts setting up a little bit, you can start putting a little more pressure, and then it's kind of a judgment when to switch to the block and actually start shaping it. The areas on the edges, you want to get on a little fresher. And again, you can see that it's not really dusty, it's like chunking, because it's starting to kick is what they say. It's still a little wet to be putting the block on it yet. Still a little wet, not putting much pressure on it at all. And as it gets a little more set up, you can put a little more pressure on as you go. You can see how wet it actually still is on how much it's plugging that paper up. And you can watch the surface. You can see that it's low, it's high, because the sandpaper will bite the high spots and you're leveling it to itself. Now this paper is getting a little plugged, so I'm just going to grab another block. It just happens to be a little longer one that I had here. Some pressure paper on it. You can see the sand scratch is pretty uniform. That means you're getting it flat. You can feel it. Another thing to wear gloves is you can feel imperfections way easier with gloves on when you're just learning, or a thin shop rag. Make sure it's a clean shop rag. You can put it over the area to feel it. Now that's looking pretty good. There's a little bit more sand in here. See these edges up here, these nice crisp? You do not want that. You want sand through to taper it. See how it's starting to cut through right here? That means you're getting the feather edge from the metal to your filler proper. If you would leave this, you'll be able to see that when you paint over. Of course, we're going to do priming and filling in another video. And see, I'm almost done sanding with this 36 grit, and it's still gumming the paper up a little bit, starting to get a little bit more dusty. So you'll want to kind of wait a little bit here. And then I'll let that set up just a little bit more, and then I'll hit it with a little bit of 80 grit, and then switch to a glazed filler actually.